Hello, friends, and my name is Steve. Welcome to the Friday Conversation, episode 86. Thank you all for listening. I hope you all had a great week. We are here with some friends today. Michael, will you start us off with an introduction, please?
Sure. My name is Michael Armilla. I'm the author of the Dragon's Blade trilogy and the ongoing Dragon Rider epic, Songs of Chaos.
Awesome. Thank you for joining us. We know you're busy. And Muriel.
So my name is Muriel, and I'm a literature enthusiast and a very small booktuber, and my booktube channel is ThePurpleBookWyrm with a Y in the worm.
Be sure and link that down below for everyone to check out. And so, Michael, for those people who aren't familiar with you or your work, can you tell us about it?
Sure. I'll speak a bit about the current series, Songs of Chaos, because that's what people sort of most know me for at the moment. As I say, it's a Dragon Rider epic, kind of in the spirit of Eragon, Perrin, that sort of thing. Obviously, there's been a bit of a rash lately of Dragon Rider books, which is great. So if you've heard of Dragon Mage by M.L. Spencer, The Bound and the Broken by Ryan Cahill, we're playing in a similar ballpark, but mine's a little bit different, being a little bit based with a progression fantasy magic system, inspired partly by Cradle, Will Wright's Cradle. And the main dragon in this story is blind, and so his bond with the young character is much stronger because of that. And the magic system is so heavily based on how the bond works that was partly sort of, it helps propel them through the various ranks of power in that story. Many other things besides, but I guess that's a very quick look in.
Nice. And just want to welcome our friend Paromita. She was able to make it. It's always good to see. Paromita, will you to give us a quick introduction?
Yes. Thank you very much for having me. I'm Paromita. I'm a member of the Page Chewing Forum, and I love to read fantasy and science fiction.
Glad you can make it. We were just saying a lot of awful things about you before we started recording.
No, we weren't.
This betrayal is noted.
Yeah. No, glad you can make it. It's always great to have you. Michael, I read on your bio that you started your first book at 10 years old, and you kept going through different drafts, and you're finally able to publish it in November of 2015. And I wondered, how many drafts did you go through with that? How many times did it change? And it must have been numerous.
Oh, geez, which bio was that?
On your website?
On the website? Oh, God, I need to update. I thought that one had been taken away, that version. How embarrassing. Yeah. Well, I in air quotes, started with when I was 10. That's when I felt like I had the idea for the first series, which is not Songs of Chaos. That's my first series, the Dragon's Blade. But I picked away, as you might do when you're 11 or 12, at like something here or there, but it was obviously absolutely terrible. But I very much put it on ice for a long time. So I wasn't really working on it for most of that time. I really started working on it in earnest in early 2015, actually, when I was down in London doing a law course and had a quarter-life crisis and realised that is not what I want to do. And writing became an escape for various reasons, and I threw myself into I had some amount of material, but very rough stuff, and I sort of finished the first book off in that year, and then released it at the end of that year in November. So not quite as many drafts as you might think over over all those years in between, but I do revise quite heavily as I go, but not in like full drafts, so it's kind of hard for me to quantify how many drafts as such that I make, because often I'll redo a chapter several times or edit it very heavily before I even get to the end of the book.
Nice. And I wondered what that experience was like to have something that you kind of started brewing at 10 years old, and then having to go through all these different through your life and all the changes that you go through in life, and then looking back on it and getting out to publish it must have been a great feeling to know that story evolved, but it was still something that you shared with everyone.
Yeah, the ideas evolved. Like if it wasn't literal drafts that changed, it was the ideas vastly changed. I mean, they were crazy. Some of the ideas were really bonkers, really weird, as you will over all that time. And thankfully, what ended up being in the book was a relatively good, coherent, tame, solid epic fantasy idea without crazy ideas of like multiple planets and weird machines from watching Star Wars and stuff like this. Like, luckily I managed to parse it down in the end. But yeah, getting it out there, it was very cathartic. As I say, like I had to, it just became an escape valve. Like I felt like really I had to write those books in order to kind of, I don't know, just shift and do something that I really wanted to do. It was both therapeutic and chasing the dream all at once. So, and it was a bit all consuming, to be honest. I look back in that time and I'm amazed that I managed to keep going, doing everything else I had to do, and then initially you work and writing isn't full time yet. And I don't know how I kept going because I get tired now. And I feel like back then I managed to make it through all that and somehow still had energy. I wouldn't be able to do that now. I think it would break me. So yeah, I'm very fortunate that it worked out.
I have a sensible question and a fiery question. Which should I go for first?
You pick.
The nonsensible question.
Fair enough. Mr. Miller, I was looking at your bio on the website, and your series is Eragon meets Fern meets Cradle, which is a very, very intriguing combination. I have read Eragon, and I believe Muriel has read Fern and Eragon.
I've read the Inheritance Cycle, and I've read 8 Pern books out of 30. Is it what? A reasonable chunk of the Pern books, yes.
I was wondering how you coalesced all these very, very different elements into your series, or how the inspirations for your series came.
Well, in some ways, Pern is not quite the best describer, but it's very much. Eragon is a big inspiration, clearly. Cradle definitely is, but there's more of How to Train Your Dragon in there than Pern. But I used Pern as the kind of, because it is written as a kind of epic fantasy that's not for, it's written for adults, but anyone can read it. It's kind of ageless, because there's no swearing, there's no adult material, let's say. There's very little, there's none of that.
There is a bit of adult material in the Pern books, though. But I agree that you wouldn't.
But there is.
Oh, yeah,
but mine
sorry.
don't.
Yeah.
So I'm saying mine don't have that.
Yeah.
The main relationship between Holt, the young kitchen boy, and Ash, our blind dragon, is much more reminiscent of Toothless and Hiccup than of any other pairing. So because I have this slight problem that some people think the book's for kids, and it's not. It really isn't for kids. Young people can read it and they can enjoy it. Also adults. I've got people in my Discord who are in their 60s, that are loving it. I've got folk that are teenagers and they're loving it. It's written deliberately to be a bit ageless and not to put any one age bracket off, which has helped me because I know quite a lot of families listen to the audiobook on long car drives in the States. So Pern is probably not the best descriptor in that sense, but it helps just key you in. I think that people realise it's in that epic fantasy bracket. It isn't aimed too young. But yeah, it's a bit more How to Train Your Dragon than Pern. But really, you just blend it all up. I mean, why is Ash blind? Ash is blind partly because I really loved how Hiccup and Toothless rely on each other so much, because Toothless can't fly without Hiccup. And that felt like a really unique aspect of because what always felt strange to me in every Dragon Rider story that I ever came across, and Eragon still being the big one, is I don't really understand what the dragon got out of the bond. It seems that the dragon had all the magic, all the power, all the majesty, and then just for some reason allows a human to siphon and bond with them and get a lot of perks. And I just was like, but what are they getting out of it? It doesn't, it's fine, but it doesn't seem realistic. Why would they do that? Why would they do that? It doesn't make any sense. But it did in How to Train Your Dragon, because for Toothless and Hiccup, Toothless really needed Hiccup, vice versa. And then those dragons, and I'm thinking more of the movies, but the dragons and the humans become friends, and that's a big change from hurting each other and hunting each other. So that all worked very well. I was just thinking with my series, okay, so I want there to be a really critical reason why dragons and humans bond. there's a benefit in this series to the bonding system. The dragons benefit magically from humans bonding to them because the humans can tend to their core. So the dragons have the magical core, and the humans, via the bond, can cleanse it, forge it, make it stronger. So a dragon in the wild will still have a core and will be magical, but a dragon in the order with a rider will gain a lot of power a lot faster and will effectively be stronger. So like a rider's dragon will be much, much stronger than the wild kindred. And in this world, there's existential, generational threats from the Scourge, this big zombie bug, horrible thing that rises every so often, so the dragons want to fight that. So when the bond is very much, when there's a reason that the rider has a purpose in the bond becomes very important, and then I was like, okay, let's supercharge that with a Hiccup Toothless situation. So, okay, that was, I think, in those movies, Toothless loses a bit of his tail wing or something, like a bit of the tail wing gets torn away, right? So Hiccup does this engineering thing, which is really cool, because he's an inventor, which obviously pairs up very, very nicely. So I was just searching around for something like that to latch onto. And at the time I was watching Daredevil season 3, which I absolutely loved. I thought Daredevil was really cool. I thought, well, the dragon could be blind. That would work pretty well. That would have some cool, unique aspects to it. And so that was kind of where that started. Was I wanted Holt and Ash to have a very strong bond, give a real reason for that. The magic system works this way, that the bond is very important, and then being blind. And him being blind is unique because the dragons in this world would never let a egg hatch that they deem to be defective. I'm making air quotes again. They wouldn't let any weakness as they perceive it to hatch. But Holt's compassion compels him to save this egg once he finds this out. Ash is hatched, and voila, they bond. So that was a bit of a rambly explanation, but it's kind of like just taking the bits that you start with. I really want the bond to make sense. And then, okay, if the bond is very important, I want it to be a very strong bond. How am I going to set that up in the world building and with their relationship? And off we go from there.
Can I ask something?
Yeah.
Would the relationship between Ruth and Jackson in the Pan books also be a source of inspiration, since that dragon is also because that's also a dragon that the egg is kind of the runt of the litter and almost left for dead.
I mean, obviously it's a tropey idea, but I haven't really read that much of Pern, so I can't. If there's a white dragon in Pern as well, I believe, right? There's white dragons everywhere. Ashes of white albino. Yeah, it's just probably tapping into the same tropes, like underdogs and whatnot. But I haven't read that relationship, so it wouldn't have been a direct influence, no. But it may well be similar for all I know, yeah.
And my other question was, since you mentioned Daredevil, so is the idea with the blindness that the lack of a sensory perception then enhances the bond? Like hearing can be enhanced in some blind people, I believe. Is it that general idea?
Well, a little bit that comes into play, but it's more like when Ash hatches as a complete baby, he's blind, so he's confused and wandering around in the dark as such, and Holt is right there as he hatches. So Holt was the first, living being he comes across. So the dragons in this world bond. Usually it's very deliberate. Like the dragons pick a human that they think is going to be good for them, and it's a bit picky, and they take their time, and sometimes they never bond at all. And so, but because Ash was obviously hatched confused and scared and everything else, and Holt's right there, and Holt's being nice and offering him food, they just bond immediately. And because Ash really, really needs Holt early on, the bond is just so much stronger. And in the world building, normally dragons never bond that young. Normally they're already kind of fully grown and then they bond. So it's like a double whammy of he kind of needs a little bit of extra help, but he's also like a baby when he bonds, so it's even stronger. But yes, over the series, it's minor spoilers, but not massive minor spoilers. Over the series, Holt, they learn to adapt to that very well, and Holt is able to start using Ash's increased hearing, like Daredevil, to also be able to put a blindfold on, fight in the dark, that sort of thing, which is very useful when you have to fight horrible, nasty bugs in dark tunnels underground, and at night, because Ash is a lunar dragon. His magic is associated with the moon and the stars, and when they create big light bombs, it can sort of daze and disorientate enemies. But if they have their, if Hulk has his blindfold down and Ash is blind anyway, they can kind of have some advantages that way. So that Daredevil aspect comes into play there. But initially, it's all just about Hulk, Ash just really needing Hulk, and it's a very wholesome sort of experience. So a lot of the other ways that people bond in the world, it can be, the dragons can be. They can come from good intentions. They want to fight this existential threat. They want power to fight the existential threat, but they're sort of driven by the power, or they're driven by something else. It's not just as wholesome as just, I need you, I want you, you're my friend, you're my best friend. Yeah. So they're set up to be quite unique, deliberately so, based on the world building. Yeah, that's why.
I was wondering if I could ask a question to maybe all the panelists, starting with Mr. Miller, of course. I was reading a bit, Mr. Miller, on your website about lit RPG and how it is a growing subgenre in fantasy. I also see a lot of posts on Reddit fantasy. And in fact, I was listening to a Twitch stream by one of my favorite authors, and he also mentioned this lit RPG series called Dungeon Crawler Cars. So it is the sort of new subgenre of fantasy which I myself am a bit unfamiliar about. But I know my other two panelists, at least they do play games, they do watch many other forms of media in addition to also reading books. And I wondered if you had any thoughts on how these different forms of media, so for example, a video game and a novel, which we traditionally assume is almost fully text, how these meet in this subgenre called lit RPG. Is it sort of this having the best of both worlds, whereby you can explore the world a bit as you would in a video game, while also having the sort of core plot line of a novel?
Yeah, I mean, lit RPG is a very, very broad category, and it's changing very, very fast. Even as it's a bit like the Wild West. Still, it's changing very, very fast. You're right in that it began kind of like as if you guys are familiar with Ready Player One.
Yes.
So, lit RPG begins a little bit like how Ready Player One is, where there's a big VR world. We will do a story in that VR world, almost entirely in that world. Sometimes there's references to the real world. Sometimes the characters come in and out. Sometimes they just stay in the game world. But when they're in the game world, there's a lot more actual statistics, like as if you were playing a real game. There's character screens, numbers, people level up. The character has to choose how to allocate their talent points and what gear they put on and all the rest of it. As if you're watching a Twitch stream in book form, kind of, but there's usually a story associated. There's usually some kind of story going along with that, like the school. In one of the famous ones, it's like the school bully in real life gets defeated in the game, that sort of thing. But these days, like RPG has sort of shifted away from the VR thing completely, and it's moved into kind of like other dimensional worlds where the character might wake up one day, they've just reincarnated in a different dimension that happens to run off of game mechanics. So there's no VR. The real world doesn't exist. It's gone, or they've fallen into a portal and they pop out in a place where the world happens to be run by game mechanics. Or there's like some element that makes that happen. The main thing for like RPG is that there's hard game mechanics in there. There's numbers in there. But otherwise, yeah, it's a story like anything else. It's the best way. In fact, the easiest way to think about it is just they're fantasy stories usually, or sci-fi stories with ludicrously hard magic systems, where you actually see the numbers and stuff like that. Some people take it very seriously and will actually start rolling dice and things like that as they write. But you've got to sometimes bend the rules. Your character has to come up lucky a few times, right, for things to work out. So yeah, I wrote one book in this space called Battlespire, which works as a standalone. It's essentially, Ready Player One, or if you like World of Warcraft meets Die Hard, and it's very much exactly what it sounds like. But Songs of Chaos is not that. Songs of Chaos is an epic fantasy with a hard-ish magic system, but some soft elements as well.
What about you, Muriel? What are your thoughts on lit RPG?
Well, I wasn't really acquainted with the specifics of it. It's interesting though, because actually recently a friend of mine mentioned a book he'd read a few years ago called Epic, written by an Irish author named Connor Costick. And that apparently is considered a very early example of lit RPG, but then I was like, I'm not entirely sure what that means. So it's interesting to get a bit of a definition on that subgenre.
Sometimes it's hard to explain. The best way is just to pick one up and read a bit, and then you'll be like, oh, I get it. You'll immediately understand.
Oh, okay.
It's just sometimes it's hard to explain. People think it's choose your own adventure. It's not that. They think it's based off of actual games. It's not. They're totally made up games. Like, it's just pick up. The best way to is just pick one up at random almost and have a read, and you'll be like, oh, I understand now.
Okay.
Like, yeah.
Because I've played RPGs.
Yeah.
And it's hard for me to imagine, like, if I were to take, I don't know, Dark Souls as a novel. I'm trying. My brain is glitching on that. So I'd have to pick one up and just kind of look at what it is. So I don't really have a specific opinion because I'm just a bit ignorant about that subgenre.
Yeah, lit RPGs they're kind of a new thing to me too. I've only read one. I read Lightblade by Zamil Akhtar, and I got through the book, and everybody kept, well, what did you think of that genre? And I didn't notice it was that genre, but kind of the way that I think of them as the character grows, almost like progresses with the story, and the character blossoms, and it's not so much of discovering things about the character, but the character grows and like levels up through the course of the story. It's kind of the way that I took it, but I think I think lit RPG. You think lit RPG, and you think more interactive. I think the title of lit RPG, I think it gives the impression that it is like almost like a choose your own adventure, or that's not what it is. So I think some people are a little bit confused by it, but I think having the character grow with you as you go through the story and not already be established is something that is fun for me. But I'm not really, if I read a lit RPG book, I don't know that I'd know that I read one, is the thing.
Or you'd know if you read a really heavy one.
Oh, okay.
Like, we're talking, the character panel comes up with the numbers, your level, your mana points, all that stuff. That's full-blown lit RPG. I think Zamil's book is progression fantasy, which is adjacent, but it's not full-blown lit RPG. Like,
I was going to say, that sounds like power progression fantasy, right?
Yes.
Power leveling fantasy. Okay.
Yeah. They're obviously all related. I mean, really, lit RPG has morphed basically into progression fantasy because that's what people are getting out of it, and people are okay to not have the numbers. The numbers started there because it really was about experiencing really cool game worlds, but everything's sort of smoothed away from that, and it's gone into secondary world stuff. Sometimes it's very, very hard. Sometimes there's still some screens, but it's a bit soft. But progression fantasy is really where it's kind of ended up, where you get very, very hard, very defined magic power systems usually, and the point is the character begins at 0, and you get that promise that they're going to become god tier by the end of the series. Yeah. Have you guys read Cradle by Will White by any chance, or anything of that series?
No, I just know of it.
Yeah, same. I have heard a lot of reviews about it, but every time I hear 12 books and then I get scared.
Yeah. So Cradle's the quintessential progression fantasy.
Oh, okay.
They're shorter books, thankfully. They're not huge tomes. They're like 100,000 tops each one. But our main character starts at absolutely less than nothing, and you're promised he's going to become a god, and effectively that's what happens over the course of the series. It's fun, it's action heavy, it's pacey, great zany characters, very kind of anime inspired, kind of a lot of it's Eastern storytelling inspired, that kind of adjacent. Cradle's great. It's really addictive, really, really addictive, and it was a big inspiration on Songs of Chaos for sure.
Yeah, I was just going to say some of those characteristics make me think of like, yeah, shonens.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Exactly.
I guess leads me to my next thought is one or too many subgenres too many, and when it becomes so confusing that we have to kind of, I mean, when does it become too much? When do we have too many subgenres? And as you market, does that make it harder to market too?
I think it can make it harder to market only because no one can agree what any of the terms mean, and so everyone just makes it up. And so, Songs of Chaos is a children's fantasy, or it's a YA fantasy, or it's a this, or it's a that, and it can be none of those things because everyone thinks it's slightly different, or their interpretation of it is different from. So it can be hard because everyone seems to think that epic fantasy means something different from everyone else, and progression fantasy means something different from somebody else. So yeah, it's difficult. But then, as I'm sure both as authors, it can be cool to find a really interesting niche that you like, and people love to write in niches. And audience, readers really like to find a new niche sometimes. Like they stumble across a style of story they've never come across before. They love that. They ask, hey, can I see examples like other things like that? And so eventually there's a tag around it, and people can point towards another list of 100 books with that. So yeah, pros and cons. The Amazon can't keep up. Amazon can never keep up. There's no lit RPG category. Well, I think there might be soon, but it's taken them about 8 years. There's no specific Dragon Rider fantasy category, which is bizarre because there's so much of that, and that's all a jumbo. It is a bit of a mess. In fact, you're better to have more, but we need to all agree on what they mean, and that's not going to happen. So yeah, maybe it would be impossible.
I think I generally agree with that. I think there are pros and cons. On the one hand, I have an affinity for like categorizing things.
Yeah.
I do like category thinking. That's just kind of how I function. But at the same time, it's true that you kind of need to have at least somewhat of a consensus on what this subgenre means and what this subgenre means. And recently I thought I knew there was cyberpunk, steampunk, and what's the other one? Biopunk. Now I discovered there's also silkpunk and solarpunk. So many other punks. I was like, I don't know what those things are.
Gaslamp.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Gaslamp. Wait, what's that?
My understanding that Gaslamp is kind of like Victorian. Well, Victorian-esque is steampunk, but it's kind of like around that time, but not mechanical.
Okay.
But someone's going to slaughter me in that interpretation as well. Probably, I'll probably get that wrong. Sort of like early modern-esque, but no mechanical tech, no industrial tech. But so gas lamp, not electric lamp. But yeah, I could be wrong.
Okay, yeah.
Could be wrong. Yeah.
Recently, I came across. It was so I have a small Discord server for my BookTube channel, and one of the people there presented a word for like what I would have called alternative historical fiction. So it's historical fiction but speculative as well, because it's like, what if this had happened in history? And the term was Uchronia.
What? I've never heard of that.
No, but it was interesting. I was like, I've never seen that before. Okay, why not? I guess.
That's new to me. There you go. I learned something new.
Yeah.
Every day. What was the term? Uchronia?
Uchronia, I think. Yeah. I'll have to look it up afterwards.
Yeah.
But yeah, and silkpunk. The other day it was just in a video, and I was like, silkpunk.
And what is silkpunk?
I believe it's that there's a certain focus on Far Eastern aesthetics.
Oh, okay. Right.
Yeah.
The Dandelion Dynasty, I think, is silkpunk by Ken Liu. So the inventions that he uses in his series. Steve has read the series. I think you enjoyed it a lot as well. I liked it a lot.
Yeah, the second book is one of my favorites, and Ken Liu is brilliant. But yeah, he does. I think he kind of gave us his insights of what silkpunk is, and I'm not sure I still understand it, but there's lots of. But just a fun fact. I looked up on Goodreads what Gaslamp and Fantasy is, and the first book listed is Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell.
Okay.
Really?
Sure.
Yeah.
This is my favorite book, so
Yeah.
I guess I love
It's
Gaslight.
like I don't know. To say my favorite could be tough, but it's easily top 5. I absolutely
Yeah,
adore
yeah,
that
top
book.
5. That's
So,
what I mean. Top
yeah,
3.
yeah,
For
yeah,
me, top 3.
yeah.
Oh,
Quite possibly top 3.
Well,
Yeah,
I will be. I'm going to read it this year. So.
okay. Do you like audiobooks or do you mostly read, Muriel?
So I mostly read text, but I've gotten back into audiobooks a little bit, so I'm open to going the audiobook route.
I mostly do audio, so that's, take that for a pinch of salt. But the audiobook for Jonathan Strange is really excellent.
Okay.
Because she does the pastiche so well, I think it suits. Well, I felt it really suited someone reading it because for me, more of the humor came out, the cadence, because he can act through the. Because a lot of the humor is in how people are being polite, but yet awful to each other, in that kind of Jane Austen style sort of writing. And it came through really well on the narration. So.
I would
I'd
definitely
recommend giving it a go.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I would definitely consider doing that because, like, I listened to. So I read The Name of the Wind and The Wise Man's Fear for the first time this year, thanks to my friend Paromita, and I very happily surprised with how much I liked it. But I listened to it on audio, and it was a very enjoyable experience. So I'm definitely open to doing more books in audiobook format.
This is going to segue very nicely into my next question for everyone, but especially Mr. Miller. Epic fantasy. What are some of your favorites, or just in general, what are some of your favorite fantasy works that you recommend? I ask everyone this question.
Yeah, all the usuals. Huge Tolkien fanboy, and then I love Song of Ice and Fire just as much. It's very, you love them for different reasons. Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, as we just said, is one of my favourite books. So, alas, we've already talked about that. More recently, oddly this year, I dived into First Law by Joe Abercrombie for the first time. I tried it years ago and bounced off of it for whatever reason, and I gave it another shot, and I really enjoyed the first trilogy. Really got into just the voice that he steeps into every character is just so wonderful, isn't it? Like and Stephen Pacey narrating it, you could just listen to that all day. Absolutely fantastic. Other things that I've enjoyed in recent years, Cradle. We've talked about Cradle. It's tough. I kind of pick up book ones a lot. Since I've started writing, you kind of pick up book ones, and I can find it hard to get into stuff now. Maybe it's because I know how the sausage is made. Maybe a bit too close to it. So I can like a book one, but it's rare that I feel ultra compelled to keep going. And I'm hoping I get over that. I hope I can go back to just enjoying things more as I used to. But I don't know. Maybe that's the curse. I think it's starting to lift. a little bit. As more ideas, sometimes on the spot I draw blanks. As more recommendations come to me, I will sprinkle them in. Would you guys have like a favourite read of this year so far?
Fantasy, I would say Lud in the Mist by Hope Mirrlees. It's this really quaint standalone. It was published in 1926. And
1926, wow.
yes, and Neil Gaiman is a big champion of this book. And he blurbed Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell as the best British fantasy written in 70 years. So that 70 years, because it was published in 2004, is a reference to Lud in the Mist. Because Lud in the Mist is sort of the tiny inspiration for Jonathan. So it's part mystery, it's a very short book, but it's magical and it's all the things that I want fantasy to be. So that was a really lovely reading experience for me.
So for me, not considering rereads, I've had more luck with my rereads, I think, this year. Except for, so I really loved what I read of the Kingkiller Chronicles. That's probably the best new for me fantasy I've read this year. And then more towards science fiction. Not the kind of thing I usually read, because I know this is going to sound weird, but I tend to read less for sheer entertainment value. But this was just a giant bag of popcorn, but in the best way possible. It was the Kaiju Preservation Society by John Scalzi. I had so much fun with that. Otherwise, I think, yeah, those are the two new read highlights for me this year. Unless I'm forgetting something very obvious at the minute. But those are the ones that come to mind.
Steve, you got a favorite?
Yeah, I'm looking through my list on Goodreads. I think I've read a lot of. I've had quite the year, but I think I've had a pretty good reading year. Everything else considered, I think the one that stands out is the Dandelion Dynasty. I think was probably the one I had the most fun with that I finished this year. But I also really enjoyed Second Apocalypse. And there's some. I don't know if you'd call that fun, but yeah, but lots of great reads this year. But I think the one that are also P.L. Stewart's books. I really enjoyed those. So yeah, I think if I had to pick one, it would probably be the Dandelion Dynasty. I guess would be the one I had the most fun with. I think the second book especially was just spectacular.
Amazing. I thought of a few more things just to toss in there. These are just things that have popped into my head, not like favourites or anything necessarily, though I do like them. But I returned to these ones a few times. Have you guys tried the Screw Tape Letters by C.S. Lewis? It's very short. It's C.S. Lewis writing letters from a senior devil to a junior devil, trying to teach him how to torment humans properly.
Oh, wow.
What's the name again? I'm sorry, it's just I can.
It's called the Screw Tape Letters.
Screw Tape Letters.
Yeah. And it is the most. It's like a work of genius. It's just so on the. It's hard to describe the way that the devil teaches the younger devil like how to really torment with humans. It's like all the subtle things. He's like, don't go for the big showy stuff. You want to just really make him hate the sound of his mother's voice. Just really, really dig into that. Really grate it in. But it's just stuff like that throughout it. But it's sort of set during World War II. So they refer to the human in question as the patient, and the patient is just a guy in England as World War II starting, and how he may or may not be being tempted properly. It's very good. It's only 45,000 words long or something. So on audio it's about 4.5 hours. That's another amazing audiobook. So that's one. That one's fantastic. Slightly more light-hearted. Also oddly during World War II. Called The Crowfolk by Mark Stay. The series is called The Witches of Woodville. And it's sort of like a coven of witches in this English village as World War II is breaking out, getting up to hijinks, and there's some really touching moments in that first book, The Crowfolk, but it's also got a kind of Pratchett-y, Douglas Adams-y vibe as well. So there's plenty of humour in it, but also a lot of heart. And it's definitely different. You want something a little different, like witches during World War II, England. You get all the kind of you get that whole era, which is quite an interesting era to return to. Plus funny witches. I know, that was just good. That was a nice break from the usual big epic stuff, Other things as they jump to me, I will again bring them up. But those are two that I'd like to throw out there because I think more people should try them.
Actually, speaking of audiobooks, I would recommend the audiobook for Neverwhere. That's my first ever Neil Gaiman I read this year. It's not a new favorite, but it was very enjoyable and it was a really good audiobook as well. There's another book, but that's one Paromita was recommended, but I think it's worth reading once in your life because it's very, very different to anything else I've ever read. I read the Gormenghast trilogy. It's very atmospheric and it's very strange, but it does have a certain charm to it. But it's quite a commitment, pages wise, and that just takes place in the sprawling castle somewhere in the world, and it's centered on this family and their very weird rituals with very goofy, strange characters.
In our world or a different world?
I think it's meant to be in our world.
Okay.
But it's left ambiguous, yes. But it was It's an experience, and I'm glad I read it. It's not a new favorite at all, but it's definitely special. So, and it's Paromita recommended it to me. So,
That's the second of my top three. So it's Tolkien, Gormenghast, and okay, I would say a tie between Lud in the Mist and Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell. But I mean, yeah, those
I'm going to
those
have
are
to
my
look up
top
Blood in the
three.
Mist. My God, this is very highly recommended. Yeah.
Yeah.
If you hate it, I'm sorry. Sometimes this happens. I recommend this and people are like, what is this?
That's always the fear, right? You say, this book is great, and then I hope they like it. I hope they like
I
it.
tried to sort of, I don't know what the word is. Inspire sounds very haughty, so not inspire, but I sort of tried to enthuse both Muriel and Steve at different points into reading War and Peace, and sadly my efforts were thwarted.
well, hey, I have to read Crime and Punishment first. Okay, it's just one big Russian author at a time.
But Mr. Miller, I was thinking of something. You spoke a little bit about how important the bond was to your to the construction of your world and
Yeah.
your fiction. I was thinking about whether you did. You must have, but whether you had fun doing research on another aspect of the world building about the dragons themselves, whether you like reading about the myths or just interesting facts about draconic creatures.
I didn't delve into endless dragon lore because again, everyone has a different take on what those are. I mean, you get some really funny reviews on my books where some people say this man doesn't understand how dragons work at all, which is very funny because as if there's
Why do you not understand?
as if I've
this
really
fictional
messed up,
creature?
as if I've really messed up. No, I just went, there's a few decisions that I decided to make. I decided to deliberately give them the four legs. I know it's trendy now that they don't have the two front legs and it's just the wings that they move forward, with, because that's more anatomically correct. But I don't care. I wanted to evoke that How to Train Your Dragon feeling. At least I wanted to make sure that Ash could be as awesome and lovable a friend to Holt as possible. So you just wanted to nudge him a little more towards like a big dog, like just a little bit, than a big birdie thing with the two wings. So I made that choice quite consciously. Like and all the dragons have that, of course, and it's not so. But they can be just as mean and grisly and awful with their four legs because they have more claws to attack you with. Otherwise, I just ran with it. There's enough ambient dragon stuff out there. I just ran with what I wanted to for the series, because the way that their cores work. I mean, I don't really want to look into, like, some people say you've got to have them have hollow bones, they fly, so they're aerodynamic. I'm like, no, they're magic, they fly. Okay, they're big, they're magic, they fly. I know that's fun flippant, but like I'm really keen on them being kind of mystical when I need them to be. Some of them are mysterious, some aren't, but they're also just characters. The dragons in this world talk, they're not silent, so they will talk telepathically, so that's a kind of a... that's not every story has that, but because they talk, they're full-blown characters, so some are good, and some are evil, and some are petty, and some are jealous, and some are... They're just characters, so... They're kind of anything. They don't act too animalistic in a certain... They don't act too much like an animal would in predictable ways because they're just like people. They just happen to be scaly, winged, fire-breathing people.
Well, actually, I do like this idea that you said you had. That why, if you start out from the premise that dragons in the world you created are sentient, very cognitively advanced beings, animals, what have you.
Yeah.
Then why would they just come along and be like, yes, we will be ridden by humans?
Yeah. Yes.
Cool.
Very demeaning, isn't it?
I like that you made it like it's a mutualistic or like symbiotic, whatever you want to call it, relationship. Like the dragons are actually getting something out of this, and they're humans too. I like that idea. Because otherwise it's kind of like, but you're treating these things that are supposedly super wise and intelligent like a horse. It's like
No, they don't like the
feels
dragons. The dragons let you know that they don't like that, and they're just as haughty, and like they won't talk. They typically only talk to humans that are other riders. They won't talk to humans that are just regular humans. They're very picky in that sense. So they have that kind of pride. But yeah, you're bonding for essentially a necessity in some ways. Like this world-ending threat that crops up once in a generation has to be fought. And other times it pops up here and there all over the place. That has to be fought, and the dragons that are willing to do that join the order to do that. And it begins with that sort of sense of necessity, but of course genuine friendships do form. I mean, even the highest of the high ranks, you cannot get there. The way that the magic and the bond develops, there's certain key milestones that I've marked in that are emotional based and insight into one another and how much you trust each other and stuff like this. Like all that has to be there. So people they do advance through those systems, but Hall and Ash go through it faster than anyone else because of how they're set up. Yeah.
Other than your own dragons, do you have a favorite dragon or favorite type of dragon?
Favorite type? Okay. What do you mean by type of dragon?
Or a favorite, I guess, favorite dragon that's been, or version of dragon, or just another that someone else had built in the mythology around them?
That's tough, man. I mean, I think the best dragon that's ever been put on screen is Smaug. For as much as those movies had difficulties, like that was just incredible, seeing him brought to life. But like my kind of I think my favorite character of a dragon is probably Toothless, even though he doesn't speak. Like he's just such a you just need to speak. He's fantastic, even when he's really awkwardly trying to flirt with the white dragon. It's just brilliant. Really failing and falling on his face, but he soldiers through like a trooper. That's Toothless. I like many dragons, but those are probably the favourites even now. I mean, I liked Flemeth in Dragon Age a lot. I don't think she's meant to be specifically a dragon, but she becomes a dragon, and I thought she's a character was very cool. And there's quite a bit of Dragon Age in the series as well, and it's, the Order is a bit like the Grey Wardens a little bit. So there's definitely some inspiration from there as well.
I was thinking about what you said about this telepathic communication, the possibility of telepathic communication between the dragons and the riders in your world. And as you said, that they are not really, I mean, they are creatures, but they do have that ability to understand. So I wanted to ask a bit, how do they cope with feelings of loss, or when their rider is in pain, or when their rider is in, I'm not talking about maybe physical danger so much, but maybe when there is emotional anguish. Is that something that the dragon senses?
Yeah, they can feel it. Both sides of the bond, they can feel each other's emotional anguish and turmoil, and to a certain extent they can shield themselves a little bit from it and limit themselves a little bit so they don't get completely overwhelmed. But there are times if either one is extremely overwrought with some kind of emotion, it will spill over. And typically in the series they talk about, because the magic of the bond flows dragon into human, you get that sense that the dragon flows into the human much more easily because that's the way that everything's flowing. So if the dragon is utterly enraged, the human can be gripped by that. They have to work at that sometimes. It can happen vice versa. It's just a little easier for the dragon to completely influence the human in that sense. Sometimes nefariously so, as well. Unfortunately, so it cuts both ways. But yeah, they really feel each other's emotions. But if the human or the dragon, I mean, it works both ways again. If one of them's very upset by something, if one of them's in grief or struggling, the other can send like literal emotional support overwards. Like you can really like just lend actual they can make you feel better or make you feel more confident, make you feel like you can cope, because they're there to like take some of that weight off of you as well. So it can be both a negative and a positive in every sense. It's very all consuming in some ways. It's very overwhelming. Being bonded like that to a big dragon.
I forgot to mention this, but the cover art of your books is really, really beautiful.
I
So
agree.
Yeah. Oh, thank you.
I wanted to ask whether you had any input on that, or whether you can tell us a bit about how the cover art was created.
Yeah, the cover you see in Ascendant now is actually not the original cover. The original cover art, you can see it on my website under like an art section, which I did like. I thought it was a great piece of art, but it didn't really work super well as a cover, just because it's a little dark. And actually, when you upload images onto Amazon sort of desaturates and cuts some of it. So what happens is that usually any cover you put up tends to look a little darker. So it was already a little dark, and then it was a bit too dark. So it didn't quite work. I love the art though, and I still have it there, and hopefully I can use it someday in some form to honour it. The new cover art was done by, and I'm going to butcher his name. I think he's from Turkey. Yiğit Konuluglu. He does a lot of Magic the Gathering art now, I think. In fact, he stopped being. I think this was the last freelance cover he ever did. And because I said, hey, can you do the second one? He was like, no, I'm going full time with. I think it was Magic the Gathering, but don't quote me on that. So that was unfortunate because it's so good. I was working with him trying to get the pose right, and I had some ideas, and I asked a friend who's got a really good eye for art, and we had some ideas, but the sketches weren't quite working. We eventually just said, you know exactly what we're trying to do. You just do it in a way that feels better to you and more natural to you. And then he came back with this pose, and so I was like, yes, go for it, 100%. So if I had tried to completely make it up, it wouldn't have been as good. It's good to have a good brief that's quite clear, but then let the artist, let the artist instinct take over to figure out how to actually do what you do best. And sometimes it will never look exactly as you thought it would look, but it will be better because they just have a better eye for like the composition and how things should sit on the page, and with the title spacing and all the rest of it. Like, you can get a rough idea in your head, but don't get so precious, because they'll know better than you, the same way that you can hopefully write the book better than they could as well. So he did a fantastic job, but obviously your cover artist leaving is worrying. The chap that did books 2 and 3 and will hopefully finish the series is Randy Vargas, and Randy was really amazing because I could imagine that some artists would be not always willing to jump in like on a book 2 where they have to sort of honour and imitate a little bit what someone else has done in the original art, but he was absolutely happy to do that, no worries. And so you can tell that they are like a tiny bit different, but you could think the same artist did them all. So he did a really good job honouring Yiğit's work, but also putting his own spin on things for 2 and 3. That third one, I don't know how we're going to top that, because I think it's just so cool. He's going to have his work cut out for him.
How much of a concern is it as you have artwork that's being created for your work? How much is it a concern now of something being created with the AI for you?
You mean like someone making some AI art of Songs of Chaos and then trying to sell it or something?
Oh no, like for the upcoming books, if you have an artist that you've commissioned to create a cover, how closely do you look at the artwork to look for things, or is it not really something you're concerned about?
Well, I mean, for this series, using Randy I've got 2 more books to go, so that's at least, and they're very big books, so I'm a couple of years still on this series, and so there's 2 covers to go. Randy won't use AI, I trust him, so I'm not worried about that particularly right now. I think it's still, you can still kind of tell when someone's used AI stuff, because there'll just be stuff that's a little, AI cannot do hands. Have you noticed that? Like, it cannot do hands.
No, it can't do hands.
No, everything else can look quite good, but the hands are just bizarre. And in fact, you can tell it's AI because a lot of it looks too good, too photorealistic, or like Unreal Engine 5 rendered. It's it's sort of too done up. There's not a lot of style. They all
Some
look similar.
tells. There's some tells
there's
still
huge
with
tails.
AI.
So I think anyone. I mean, there was there's been some controversy. I know in the indie community there was some controversy this year with a certain AI cover. So it can slip by. Sometimes it's hard to tell, especially if they get really stylized. But I'm not concerned. I mean, Randy won't do that. He's great, and I will always deliberately look for artists with a good portfolio that are going to do it in their style and their way, and you wouldn't be able to imitate that. And yeah, I'm not worried. I'm not worried because I'm in control of my books, so I will put on it real art, and that'll be fine. Not so worried. I mean, honestly, some people, I know a lot of writers also are worried about it now, the AI stuff, but this is my job. I'm not going to just suddenly stop my job because something is coming along that may or may not change things. I'm just going to keep going and roll with what happens. But I'm always going to write. And if I can't write better than the robot, then maybe what's the point? But I'm going to keep trying. I'm going to keep doing it. I can't suddenly just drop everything and do something else. So I'm just going to stick at it, and if we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I don't think. I hear a lot. I mean, I'm in circles where this stuff is discussed a lot as well because I have a lot of computer science friends, and the AI debate I think is complex. I think you should take it seriously, but doom mongering about it I think is counterproductive. And so even with people who are worried about AI, is what the solution to just roll over and die, so to speak? I don't think so. If
writing or doing art is what you love, you're going to find a way to do it, I mean, I think it sucks more now for artists because it's a little easier for people to spin up, stuff for marketing or whatever. Yeah, I think that's a little more scary for them. But then the people that really want to pay for actual art will hopefully still find them in the right places that they still do, and they'll find their audience. And if a big company wants to try and cheap out by using AI, whatever, well, I mean, that is unfortunate, but I hope that the artists still keep making art because people are forever making art and finding ways to make it work and make a living. I think that will always be the case.
I think, unfortunately, a lot of this stuff is inherently tainted by the financial considerations and all of that stuff, capitalism, etc. But creativity and the artistic impulse is it's a human thing. Why should we just stop doing that? Like I'm not a professional artist, but like I draw, I illustrate in my spare time. I'm not just gonna stop because robots, to put it oversimplistically, but yeah. So
indeed, like even AI narration, people will do it. People will pay. People will just get an AI to narrate their audiobook. At least in the near future, it will not be as good. It will be obvious. It won't match a person, and I would always get a person to do it because there's going to be stuff that the computer will just never get. It will never get certain interactions. I don't think. I don't know. Even as good as they're going to get, I don't know.
I agree.
Because they're very good at following a logical sequence. Because if you see the people that have asked it to write them a fantasy story, like it is very paint by numbers, and it can kind of mimic something, but it can't quite spin everything into something new. Like if you'd given it my series, books 1 and 2, and said write the third one, I'm sure it would have come up with some kind of competent thing, but it wouldn't have come up with a lot of the things that I put in that there wasn't any information in books 1 and 2, because I'm just sort of I'm adding things in which changes the context of previous stuff that just comes out of nowhere, right? That the things happen that because I was saving them elements of the world building and the magic, because there was nothing to hint at that. It wouldn't know how. It couldn't make that up. It wouldn't be able to just do this thing because it would just sort of carry on what's there, at least for now. And I'll eat my words. Maybe one day it will do that. But as you say, what are you going to do? Just roll over? You're just going to keep going, right? You're going to just keep going. Yeah.
You cross the bridge when you come to it.
Yeah.
Oh, that's an interesting. I never really thought of it that way about how past events could, the context of them change, or things that you set up that only you knew about that you planned on doing later, or that you decide to do later on a whim. I never thought of it that way about kind of writing the next book in a series.
because humans are random chaos monkeys and computers are too logical, right? It won't be able to just think, oh, I'll just do this now, and I'll make it work, because it won't think to do that. It can think to do that, right? Maybe I'm naive, but I don't think it can. Just completely invent a new thing and shove it in and be like, yeah, this was here the whole time, stuff like that. Yeah.
Random chaos monkeys are like that. Yeah.
I love that.
I wanted to ask a bit about the writing and drafting process for you, how that goes. Do you do a lot of revisions? Is it more you write sections until they are perfect? How is it for you?
I usually have a decent idea, like a decent kind of plan of the whole book. More so now than I used to. I find that more planning now is very helpful for me. I'll start. The start of a book is usually quite straightforward. Then I'll get gulped down once I hit about 30% or so, and then at that point I just try to take each chapter at a time, really plan it out to the nth degree. So like it's almost as long in note form as it would be as an actual chapter, but a lot of that is explaining the motivations to myself, stuff like this. So then when I come to write it, it's much easier and it comes out a lot cleaner. But typically I find every 40 to 50,000 words, I kind of take a little step back, and sometimes I know, okay, I need to make this adjustment for what will happen later. And I tend to just do that. I tend to just make those adjustments, those developmental revisions as I go. Sometimes I'll push on, but over a big book, these books, the last book, Defiant, was 250,000 words published. It was 300,000 words, and I cut it down to 250. So they're very big books. If I kept just pushing forward, it would be carrying over too many errors, if that makes sense. And then you would eventually go back and forget to do the revision because best will in the world even notes. So every 50,000 odd words, I kind of take stock of where I am, and sometimes I'll make revisions then and then move on. So by the time I actually get to the absolute end point of like when I have something that's roughly a first draft, most of that has gone through quite a few revisions already. So then the kind of final revision process is a much quicker thing.
How important what do you look for in beta readers or even an editor? Do you look for certain things or certain work that they've done previously, or how does that process go for you?
So when it comes to like developmental edits, I'm very lucky. One of my best friends works as a developmental editor at the publishing company we founded together, and he's the best person I've ever met about this stuff. You can just brainstorm with him and talk things through, and what might take me days of agony can take us 15 minutes to knock through, and we'll find a solution pretty quick. Like he's very good at high level, the story structure and everything being paced right, and just kind of can just give you good ideas that you can grab and then latch onto. Like, yes, that's my lifeline, and now you figured out the answer. He's just brilliant at brainstorming and going through that whole thing. So if I get stuck, I go to him. I beg for some time, and and we work it out. I buy him a lot of smoothies and a lot of burgers and stuff like that. Copy editor, that took a while. I went through several copy editors over the years until I've landed with someone that I really trust, that I feel really works with my style, that actually gets the stuff, that likes the stuff and does good work, because I have had some unfortunate experiences with copy editors. It's not always smooth going. Sometimes they're good people that are highly recommended, but maybe they rushed one job. It's something you don't know. But with my current copy editor, that's not the case. The books usually come out pretty damn clean. Very happy with him, and he's read all my stuff, so he knows also the story, but the style and how it should go, and he's got his own little internal sort of wiki of how everything should be, what's capitalised and what's not capitalised and that sort of thing, which is very helpful. So that took a little while to find. So if you were thinking of self-publishing and you have a bad experience with a copy editor, yeah, sometimes that happens, and it sucks. Hopefully the next time won't be so bad, and hopefully one day you land with someone that you really like and can really trust.
Lots of options.
I wanted to ask... Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead, Parm. It was nonsense. Go ahead.
Um, I wanted to ask similar. So, any long form work, especially in epic fantasy, for example, you mentioned you are a huge Tolkien fan. So, Tolkien actually wrote all three parts, more or less, and he was able to revise the previous parts and
Yeah.
before he went. But nowadays, that is not possible. We have one volume, it is published, and then the next volume, and henceforth. Is there a cascading effect, and does that become restrictive, or if one has an outline, is it still relatively, uh,
I think if it, I
is it not
mean,
an issue?
well, I mean, Tolkien did that because he wrote this giant thing without any thought that someone was actually going to do it, right? I know he was asked to do a second Hobbit, but I don't think that's what his publisher expected. So, they would have been that guy would they would have been well within their rights to be like, no, we're not. Thankfully, they did, but he was kind of writing that more for his own pleasure in some ways, and there wasn't that expectation, so that was really great. I mean, if you have the clout and the resources, now you can do it. It's a question of time, right? So I think Joe for both of his series had all the books written before they were published. I know definitely for the latest trilogy. I'm not sure about the very first trilogy, but I know at least for his latest one, all of them were finished before he released them, which means he could go back and he could layer, he could edit things and work them through. But that's Joe Abercrombie, so he can take that time. It will be published, thumbs up, all good, doesn't need to worry about X, Y, Z. So if you get to that position, I think that could work really well. But with this series that I'm writing right now, it will be 5 books. It'd be tough to write all 5 books first and then start releasing them. Because as I was writing the first book in this series, I was already full-time writing. I'd already made that transition. But you kind of have to. You can't sit around for 5 years without releasing something. So there's a bit of that at play. It's just the nature of people. I think everyone would love to do that, complete it, make it a masterpiece, and then put it out. But there is a reality that traditional authors need to hit deadlines to get advance money so they can eat and pay mortgages, and self-publishers also need to release something every now and again so that the algorithms don't forget about us and throw us out. And every so often there'll be someone that puts out that one book and it's a giga hit, but that's very, very rare. You do typically have to release regularly to the standard of your genre. So in epic fantasy, releasing a book a year is great. In fact, that can be considered quick for some people. If you were in light RPG, you've got to release it much faster typically, depending on how big it is. Romance authors, they're putting out sometimes a book, they're short books, but a book a month, some of them, because they're just blazing through stuff. And that's expected because the readers have a certain, readers of all these genres have different expectations. You've got to sort of meet that, unless you're in a real exception, of which very few people are the exception. You've got to sort of meet halfway there. So is it limiting to write one at a time? Sometimes. I mean, there are things that I discover along the way, and it would have been great to have known all of that as I was writing book 1. It would have been. It would have probably made it better, but that's okay. That's fine by me. Each book is outlined quite well before I start each one. I do have a rough idea of what might be coming, but I allow that freedom of letting myself also think of new things as I go too. It's not too restrictive. As I said, I'd love to do it. I think the reality is that I think at best, even for a future series, I might be able to finish maybe 2 books ahead of time. But you don't want to sit on things for too long, especially self-pubbing. You do want to try and hit stuff relatively frequently, just so those algorithms don't forget about you. And listen, until you're a Joe Abercrombie or Will White, your audience isn't that big that they can't forget about you. You have to keep reminding them that you're out there and keep giving them good stories. I don't think for me, I don't think it's a problem. I think I can still write great books and come up with cool things, and I'm happy with that.
Thank you.
You mentioned the algorithm. and algorithms, I should say. How much does that come into play with how you your approach to marketing or getting the word out about your upcoming projects or existing projects?
Well, having just said the algorithm is really important, I didn't release a book in 2022, so I completely didn't take my own advice, but it was still a good year. Because you're an epic, you can take a little bit longer, and things are set up on my end that I don't rely so much on it being super frequent. But because I don't release super frequently, I actually do need to work a bit harder. I'm not just tickling the algorithm constantly by releasing stuff. If you release something and it's mildly successful, you'll get like a kind of 90-day boost on these systems. So if you're someone that can release every 90 days, some people can, you'll keep spinning that around. Even if you release every 6 months, you'll get more of a spin for it. If you're doing a book a year like I am, not so much. You'll still get a launch boost, but you have to work a bit harder to get the word out, like you say. So yeah, everything, man. So like building up social channels, mailing lists, Discord, trying to reach out and work with booktubers, reviewers, and just making sure that they know a book is coming and make sure they have a copy, and hopefully they'll get to it one day. They're super busy. Yeah. Offering up to do interviews as much as possible, and you run some Amazon ads, and I'm fortunate enough to sell well on audio that I have a rep with Audible that helps me get promotions and other opportunities. So planning that and making sure everything's squaring there. Doing work with broken binding, with signed editions and things like this, so you get slightly different audience there. Yeah, just constantly trying to do activity, mostly around the launch time, leading up to a launch or just after a launch, in the downtime between really cranking into a draft, just throwing everything I've got at it to hopefully be heard a little bit above the noise, and then back to writing. And after a certain point, at least for me, because I only put out one book a year, I try to make sure that book is as good as I can possibly get it. And then, because I don't want to just play the algorithm game. I hope that the books are good enough that, 40 years from now, people might still find them and buy them. But hopefully they can sell for my entire life. And that's much more valuable than trying to just churn the algorithm, in the short term. That's my philosophy. Maybe I'm just lucky, but seems to be going okay.
Yeah.
I was going to ask, actually, do you find that the whole self-promotion aspect of self-publishing, does it sometimes impact your creativity negatively, if only because of the fatigue or the cognitive load, and that it impinges on when you actually get back fully to writing? Does that stuff kind of stick around a bit too long in your mind and affects your routine?
Things like this, like chatting to you guys, like doing interviews or chatting, doesn't at all. I love talking shop. That's great. That doesn't affect me at all. But I guess like more grindy admin related to that can, like setting up discounts and getting the promo sites and going through all the admin can take a while. And even if it only takes an hour and a half in total to set up one, somehow that does like just fatigue a little bit. You just feel like, oh, I've looked at a lot of boxes, and so yeah, that can do it a little bit. But that doesn't happen too often. So anything that's interacting with readers and reviewers and other people in any capacity is fine. That doesn't really hinder it at all. And there is some of the other stuff, but it's not. It's a little bit. It feels more than it is, I think.
So you think there's a good balance between the two that works for you?
Yeah, I think. Again, everyone's different. For me, as I say, like on the lead up to a launch, around the launch, just after a launch, I'm mostly just business stuff, marketing stuff, advertising stuff. Like, I'm not really writing much at all. In between these books, so like I finished Defiant was completely finished end of March. It went to the narrator like the last day of March. And I didn't really write anything until August when I started working on 2 novellas, which I've now finished. But there was just months there where like I was taking a break. I had lots of weddings to go to, but it was visiting the studio where they do recording. So I was going there to like meet Peter, the narrator, and the team, and record a little bit myself and do stuff like that, and then making sure everything with Audible was ready, making sure every reviewer that I could contact knew about it and had copies and things like that. And it's surprising. You sometimes think, how is that passing the time? The time really gets filled up with a lot of that. But I was also planning the next book, so I was planning the next book, launched that book in July, did those novellas in August and September, and now I'm back to the next book. But I already have a plan in place, so I can hit the ground running. So even if I'm not writing, I'm planning or doing something related to it. I'm rarely just completely away from. And one thing with the psychology that I struggle with still is like, planning is still writing. Just because you're not putting down 1,000 words of prose, it's obviously good work, but psychologically, we as writers often get really worked up with our word count per day. Has its utility, but if you've done a good stint of planning and you've made some breakthroughs, probably the creative energy you needed to figure out something to do with the plot, the story, character arc, motivations, or world building is much more to sort of, even just to get like one really good idea that you can then knock down really fast. It takes a lot more energy than just writing, some prose for the story, because you're really having to think in a major way. You're not, when you just get into the flow and the zone, like a good dialogue scene can come out a lot easier once you already have all that in place. And so, but we think, I didn't manage to do much today. I only got like one thing figured out. But no, that's a really important thing. So it's just trying to let yourself be okay with the idea that you did do lots of work. It just wasn't actually putting words down, but it still counts. Yeah.
No, that's a really good point, because I've done a little bit of writing, but it's not fiction. And I had an ex-partner who was also trying to be a fiction writer, fancy, and I relate by proxy to a lot of that we have a certain idea of what productivity and creativity actually looks like, but there are lots of different facets to it, and in other creative mediums as well. It's like if you're actually planning or figuring something in the plot, character interactions, you're creating something. It's part of the process.
It's really hard. I mean, even though I'm 7 books down, they're big books. It's my full job. I sell lots of copies. You'd think I'd be used to this. No, every time I feel the same way. But a good thing to remember is like, have you guys watched all the behind the scenes of Lord of the Rings on the films, like the making of stuff?
A lot of them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Like if you've got access to them, some of them are on YouTube. But like, look at the stuff they did pre-production. They took this is why it turned out so well. Where they had years and years. They were storyboarding the hell out of that thing. They made a lot of the costumes before they even rolled the camera. They made miniatures of a lot of the sets, and they had like the lipstick camera shots of figurines, and a lot of the shots from the pre-production stuff is the exact shot from the film. So they could plan how they'll angle the shots for everything. A lot was planned out. That's not rolling the camera with actors. That's a lot of time that was spent not shooting a movie, in quotes, but all of that was really, really vital, because they turned out so well, because they had all that stuff there to back them up, and they weren't just winging it. And so you can think, if you're someone that does like to plan an outline, that is what that is. That is all that good work is really, really vital. It will help you, even if in the moment you feel like it's not productive. It's super productive. But yeah, I know it's a struggle. So it's okay if you feel bad about it, but try not to.
No, I completely agree, yeah.
Okay.
Just the marketing aspect sounds exhausting, especially with all these other social media platforms. Do you have a certain platform or platforms that you focus on? Because it can really take your whole day away if you had to visit all of them.
Sure, yeah, if you sit in them. I mean, for a while I essentially ignored a lot of it, because it didn't really seem to impact me at all. I wasn't that kind of person, so I just sort of ignored them. And I managed to get away with that for a long time. I've only started to engage more in the last year, just because I've pulled back direct advertising spend. So for a while I was spending quite heavily on Facebook and things like this, and as all of that started to collapse and be useless, it was like, okay, great. I mean, I'm saving, and luckily I kind of pushed the boulder up the hill enough that, word of mouth, I'm now selling. I don't necessarily need to just bang out lots of ads in that sense. If they ever worked, it's always questionable whether they ever worked. So that's great, saving some money. But if I don't do anything, I will feel like that's dodgy. You want to be doing something. So I've tried to engage more recently. I would say to people, unless they really love doing it, just find one platform that they quite like and just focus on that one platform. Don't try to do them all. And just because someone says do TikTok, you don't have to do TikTok. You can sod off with that. If you don't care, if you're cranky like me, and you're like, I don't know how this works. Like, I load it up and literally it just bombards me with nonsense, and and I close it down. Okay, I'm like, what is this crap? So I ignore TikTok. That's fine. Maybe that's to my detriment. I don't care. It would not be worth it mentally to try and get on top of that. I don't walk around in life with a camera. I don't know how to make the little clips. I don't do that. I write big books, and that's what I do. Okay. So you can just find if you must pick one poison and drink that slowly. Don't worry about trying to guzzle all of the poisons. So I typically use X. If it's called that, it's called X now, isn't it? I will use X to post sometimes, and then I use that more as almost like a direct. It's like a kind of LinkedIn for writers and people. Like, people use that as a way to do like kind of soft networking. It's not that's how people kind of connect without giving each other their phone numbers. In a kind of collegiate sort of way. That seems to be where that functions best, and that's really great. But my personal love, I love Discord. I have a Discord server. We've got 1,100 people in there. It's really great. People play Dungeons and Dragons with each other in there. Share fan art, all sorts of stuff. Share theories about the books and all sorts of stuff. And I wish I had started that sooner. That's the one that I really wish I had started sooner, because it's a really nice organic way just for people to chat, not just to me but to each other. It's free, which is good. If you tag people in there, they will get the alert. There's not like that kind of algorithmic blockage system. If people mute the server, that's obviously sort of shuts it down, but that's if they choose to. And it seems that most people are cool to keep it open as long as you don't spam them. So I really like Discord for that. I think it's really natural, and I feel the most natural on there as well. Whereas some of the other times I feel like, okay, I'm posting here because they kind of have to post here. Now I'm fortunate enough to have a PA who is starting to post on a lot of other things on my behalf, and she's trying to manage that, and so I don't have to do it, and she can work the hashtags and do all that, and that's one way you can do it. You can get someone to help you. Yeah. So, but don't worry. I've sold a lot of books, and my Twitter following is like 1,500 people. It was lower a year ago. Like a lot of people think that you need a big social media following to sell books. You don't. Okay, you can really sell a book. You don't need to have this huge presence. It works for some people, but it's not some magic bullet. If you look at any authors that typically have a big following, they have a big following because they're big authors. It's a chicken and egg. They didn't magically have millions of followers and then became a massive name in epic fantasy. They have lots of followers because they're a big name. Full stop. Right. How books sell is this mystical art. It's not necessarily down to Twitter. Can be sometimes, but I would sort of be shocked if I've sold many books via that. I think there's other things you can do.
Yeah, that's one thing I've talked to other authors about is, a lot of people who are just getting started, and they worry about their following, but because you have 5,000 followers doesn't mean that that's 5,000 people who are going to buy your book. I mean, that's not necessarily.
You can look at like some of the YouTubers that have released books, and they sometimes give you numbers. Daniel Green might be a good example. He did a video where he showed how many copies of his novellas and stuff that he sold off the bat, and so he's got like 400,000 subs, maybe more, or something like that.
Yeah, that's about right.
If you break down the number of sales on a single title, it's maybe 5% of that number, and probably a bunch of people that bought it aren't subscribed to him. They're just other people that came. So like, it's going to be a really small number that might come through. So it's not like it's helpful, But it's kind of scary that someone could have 500,000 subscribers and it might sell 10,000 books for it or something. Just on its own, and that could be the kick. It might even be less than that, but that could be the kick that launches it into the systems and gets it really visible, and then it starts to kind of snowball and take effect. I mean, that can certainly be what happens. But yeah, you don't worry about making the book as good as you can. Worry about knowing what kind of reader is going to like the book. Worry about getting an amazing cover, a good title, because title is really important too. Don't have some really odd esoteric title. Have a really great blurb, very great cover. Know if you're writing in a certain kind of space, so I know I'm writing a Dragon Rider epic, you kind of know who you can talk to, you can know your comparisons. All of that is way more important than how many followers you've got on Instagram. 100%. 100%.
So we're not going to see you dancing with your book on TikTok?
Well, never say never.
I don't get it either.
I just won't be.
That's a thing.
I just won't be filming it. But if someone wants to film that for me, then maybe. If someone is willing to film that and give me the footage, I'll upload it. But
Yeah, TikTok is the thing where I went, I'm too old for this.
Yeah, me too.
I just
at the age of when TikTok came out, I think I was 29, and I was like, I'm already too old for this. I'm hard past.
Yeah, I don't get it either, but I mean, yeah, it's rough.
Plus now YouTube is kind of like doing shorts to try and get bits of that market back, so it's like, okay, whatever. I prefer medium to long form content generally in any case.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely.
Cling on to that attention span for dear life.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think, and that attention span, I think, is like when people have thousands of followers on X or YouTube or wherever it is. A book is an investment. It's a time investment. It's not just. You engage with it and you have to spend time with it. I think it's important to remember too. Like just because you have so many followers or whatever doesn't mean you're going to get that investment. Or you're going to get that return from subscribers or followers. So
yeah.
Not always. I mean, don't pick one, have a go at it. But I would sort of use it. I would use it more to try and engage with other writers in your space, some of the reviewers, and just try to be be part of that community and just kind of try to make colleagues and friends and peers. You think of it using it that way rather than worrying about who's following you, and start from there and then go from there, and people will come and join you if you've put the links on your website and then your books to the one that matters to you. And if people are buying your book and enjoying it, a certain percentage of them will come and follow you or join your mailing list or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And over time that will build up. But I like to use them more as a way to kind of keep in touch with friends and peers that other writers and people that I've met at cons or whatever else, or just getting a sense of what's going on in the space. Yeah. If you worry about your follower count, that's weird, because you should really be obsessing about how many books you're selling, not how many followers you've got, right? That's the one to really worry about. Refreshing the dashboard constantly, that's the tick you've got to be careful of here.
Yeah. It's always one of those hot button issues, but how do you handle reviews or reviews for your work, and do you ever interact with reviewers after they leave whether it's a positive or negative review? What are kind of the guidelines that you follow for that?
If it's a generic review on like Amazon, you can't respond, or you can, but it's just you can, but I never do. On Goodreads, I just tend to I'll just read them. I tend not to respond, because sounds very bad. If you responded to even all the good ones, you'd be there at a certain point. You'd be there all day just saying, "Oh, thank you." It would take a lot of time to go through every review and respond at all. So it's kind of easier just to not respond to any of them. Even if it's very negative. If something's weird, like a negative one, you're going to get negative ones. If something's really funny weird, like really bizarre weird, like crazy, like I sometimes will screen grab them and just sort of post about them in a funny way, obviously taking people's names out. And that can be amusing, because it's just people are just I don't know, have you read, is this the right book, or whatever it may be. People that tell you you've written about dragons wrong, or I accidentally offended all vegans by having the dragons eat meat. That was a big no. Stuff like this. Yeah, I like to post about that because it's kind of funny. But if a reviewer that I've been in touch with and sent a book reviews and enjoys it, I tend to say thanks very much. I'm glad you enjoyed it. That sort of thing. Would you like this? Would you like the next one? And that sort of thing. If they don't like it, I'll sometimes say, well, sorry that didn't work out, thanks for trying it. If they're nasty, I just tend to ignore it, because what are you going to do? What are you going to do? It's unpleasant, but what are you going to do?
Yeah, definitely. The time always flies, but I have I try to ask all of our guests one last question, and that is, what was your first job, and what did you learn from that experience?
So, first real job. I worked some interning stuff through summers at uni, and then after uni I came to London to do that law course that I talked about. And then I finished that, put the book out. So what was my first real job? I mean, I guess the first job that I did that wasn't like an interning thing, though some of those were paid. I did the classic thing in some ways. Like once I had the first book out and dived out of law, I picked up a retail job for like 6 months, and I'm not sure that taught me an awful lot, other than if I'm left to my own thoughts, I can come up with. I'm okay being with my own thoughts, because sometimes it's really quiet, especially on a Sunday, in some of these stores, and you're just sort of sitting there like twiddling your thumbs a bit and thinking in your own head. Yeah, I'm not sure that taught me too much. But the next job I had after that was at Bloomsbury Publishing for a while in London. That was interesting in a number of ways. I was doing some data management stuff there, and cleaning Excel spreadsheets and doing stuff like that. So that gave me some efficiencies in how to use Excel, I suppose. But I think about one key lesson, like, I've just always been very competitive and very self-driven, like always competing against myself. So I was always going to, whatever I ended up doing, would be trying to outdo myself all the time. And that's what I tried to do for each book, just constantly trying to outdo myself. So I went from uni to retail to publishing to just me, just being a writer. So quite quick.
Nice. You're doing something right. On your website, you have on all the list. You were on the Amazon 100, the top 100 best-selling titles. You were number 1 in epic fantasy, number 1 in dragons and mythical creatures, number 1 in sword and sorcery, and number 1 in YA epic fantasy. So you're doing pretty good.
So far so good. Touch wood.
Yeah, congratulations.
Hopefully it keeps going. Thank you.
Good stuff. So for anyone looking to connect with you, Michael, where's the best place to find you?
Probably the best place just to go to my website, which is michaelrmiller.co.uk, and links to everything there, links to all the books, all my socials, including that cool Discord server, all of it on there. Probably the best hub to come find me.
Awesome. And Muriel, where's the best place to find you?
YouTube. My YouTube channel, ThePurpleBookWyrm with a Y, and I'm also review books on Goodreads.
Awesome. And Paromita?
I can be found on the Page Chewing forum. I'm there almost every day.
Yeah, that's the best place to find me too, and our little community there. And if anyone ever wants to join us for one of these Fridays, join our forums and check them out. A lot of really great people there. We have great conversations, and just a friendly community. So thanks again, everyone. Thanks again, Michael. Really appreciate your time. And Muriel and Paromita, it's always a pleasure.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's been great fun. Thanks, Steve.
Yeah.
We'll talk very soon. Hope everyone has a great weekend.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Everyone.